any questions or things, let's hold off to the end so we can handle it all orderly and get a good recording for everybody. Thanks.
All right. Hey, first of all, I want to thank all of you guys for taking Brendan off our hands. We were looking for somewhere to dump him. And, yeah, so there are lots of things about this that are new and unique to me. I have never used a karaoke machine to do a sexual harassment training, so that's cool. I've never had a canine friend with me while I was doing harassment training, and so you guys are all going to have to just bear with me. How many of you guys woke up this morning and thought, all right, today is going to be great. I get to go to harassment training? Isn't that kind of what you all woke up? Hey, thanks. I am glad. I am super glad. So, I don't know about you guys, but you pretty much cannot get away from harassment stuff right now. It's kind of overexposed, if you want to say that. But I like cartoons, and actually, in a little bit, I've got another cartoon for you. But I don't know, Dilbert is my favorite. I don't know if you guys read Dilbert, but on Sunday, Dilbert had a cartoon where he was giving away Harassment suits. And the employees each had to wear Harassment suits when they talk to each other, and they don't actually get to speak directly to each other. They had little microphones, and it got submitted directly to Human Resources, and then Human Resources gets to filter out any inappropriate contact. So I don't think, you guys have cool stuff here, but I don't think you have any of these yet, but maybe coming soon. So if you want to go, okay, so this is in honor of Valentine's Day. This is my one, I didn't bring hot chocolate or candy for you. I thought Brendan was going to have candy, but I hear it's just hot chocolate today. I picked this cartoon out a while ago, actually, and thought it was kind of funny. And then yesterday I was at a meeting and I ended up having to draft like a love contract. That's what they were calling it, a love contract. So, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, and clearly in my world it frequently is. So today we are not going to go through contracts about how to guarantee that you're not going to harass each other if you give each other Valentine's candy, but we are going to spend some time talking about harassment. And honestly, like Brendan said, the reason all employers have to do this, I do this quite a bit, because it matters to judges, it matters to juries that employers are trying to enforce these kind of rules. And the whole Harvey Weinstein thing has just brought it, kind of cranked it up another level. And so we're going to go ahead and go through a little bit, but I know you guys are a competitive bunch, and so we're going to do a quiz at the end. So you want to pay attention because there's a quiz coming up, okay? I wish I had those little clickers they use in high school so we could see how you guys do on the quiz, but I'm just going to have to call on people. So harassment. What is harassment? Really, harassment is it's really just a form of discrimination. At the end of the day, it's treating people differently based on their protected class. And so then the next thing you have to figure out is what's their protected class? What is a protected class? And honestly, most of these things are characteristics that are protected by federal law. There's a few of them up here that are listed because you guys have employees in Minnesota, and they're not actually protected under federal law or under South Dakota law, but Minnesota kind of goes above and beyond in many areas. And so anybody want to guess what are the things that are just covered by Minnesota law and not federal law, not protected? Sexual orientation. That's actually been really controversial. Under the Obama administration, there was a big push that sexual orientation was actually just kind of a part of gender. The Trump administration, not surprisingly, has kind of backed off of that. So right now, it's not clear that sexual orientation is covered under the federal law. What else? Number 10, genetic information. No. Shockingly enough, our tax dollars, we sent people to Washington to protect all of your genetic information. So that is a federal law, that you can't be discriminated against based on your genetic information. It's really one of those things that I didn't think was a big problem in the Midwest, but they thought it was federally. The other two that are not covered is, well, actually there's really the only other one I kind of tricked you. The only other one that's not listed under federal law is familial status. So if you have kids, which, you know, honestly is probably comes under gender, but it doesn't necessarily protect guys. But if you have small children, guys, and you have to leave work to go take care of them, that kind of thing is protected under Minnesota law. All right, so we'll move on. The next one. So this is the federal definition of harassment. And you should pay attention because when you look at the policy that you guys just rolled out here yesterday, it's going to have language very similar to this. This is taken right out of what the EEOC says, and then every single sexual harassment or other kind of illegal harassment case you read is going to have this same language in it. So you can see why Brendan and I went to law school, because nobody uses words like pervasive. You guys use pervasive yet when you're on the phone recruiting today? Severe, pervasive, and persistent. Those are the things that the courts are always talking about. And so in order to be harassment that's protected, it has to be severe, really, really bad. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I keep forgetting that I'm supposed to be paying attention to the camera. And so it's severe, really, really bad, or pervasive. It happens a lot, and it happens more than once. Persistent. So those are the things that they're really looking for. And then it has to be based on your protected status. And there has to, and you're also protected from any kind of retaliation. So any kind of adverse action, something that you wouldn't, if you had known that that was going to happen to you, you would not have reported the harassment. That's what retaliation is at the end of the day. So we can move on. The next slide. This is something that I think is really confusing to people, and I run into a lot. What's the difference between bullying and harassment?
Physical and verbal.
Physical and verbal? So bullying is physical and verbal and harassment is not?
No.
It's a good guess.
I would say bullying is not a part of those protected, just making fun of somebody but not making fun of them under the protected things. And yeah.
Bingo, you get another cup of hot chocolate, I think.
All right.
That really is the difference. I mean, bullying is not something that really any employer is like out promoting. Like, hey, I want you to come to work and really bully your coworkers today. But bullying is not protected by federal law. So, because bullying is not based on one of those protected characteristics. You're just mean because you're mean. Mean to everybody, maybe. But sexual or harassment has to be based on one of those protected characteristics. And so I hear employees make claims of harassment a lot, you know, particularly if they're being closely managed by a boss with performance issues or something, and then they'll say they're being harassed. And really, because it's not based on a protected characteristic, it's probably not illegal harassment, which is what we're talking about here. Okay, next slide. So this is another kind of tricky question that I get people. Can you be fired for inappropriate contact, inappropriate behavior, even if it's not illegal? Absolutely. And this is the one rule that, like, even when I do junior achievement training at high school, this is the one thing that everybody knows, if you want to go to the next slide, is that we're an at-will employment state, which ultimately means you can be terminated for any reason. You know, you could be terminated because you wear purple and white polka dot socks and your boss doesn't like that. As long as it's not an illegal reason, under South Dakota law, you could be terminated for anything. So you're not necessarily protected because you're bullying and it's not harassment. That still can be a grounds for termination. And that's another thing that I find that people get confused about. So, okay. So sexual harassment. This is what we've been hearing about so much in the press right now, and you hear people losing their jobs right and left. And so what's the difference between sexual harassment and regular harassment? Oh, good. Thank you for laughing. It's based on gender. This is where it all started. You know, honestly, when I was getting out of law school is when Clarence Thomas was being going through all his confirmation hearings, and that's really where sexual harassment really came to the forefront, because Anita Thomas had accused him of sexual harassment, and there were days and days of hearings. And it was after that that courts first started saying that employers had to have policies against sexual harassment. So the first policies I ever drafted were just sexual harassment policies. And it wasn't until at least a decade later that we had to expand them to be harassment based on any protected characteristic. So, because I'm telling you this because when you look at your harassment policy, you're going to see it's kind of like, you know, you have an appendix because it's kind of left over and nobody really knows why. You're going to see that there's a definition of harassment, and then there's a separate definition of just sexual harassment. And honestly, this is where I see most of the complaints, is in the whole area of sexual harassment. So sexual harassment isn't just, you know, an odd, off-the-cuff comment. It's not a compliment. It's not something that's socially acceptable, but it's something that's unwelcome and that's personally offensive. So what that means, it's offensive to the person receiving it, not necessarily to the person who's giving it out. And that makes it tricky because not everybody has the same level of acceptance of, you know, different kinds of banter. Some people think that some things are funny and other people think the same thing is offensive. And so that makes it really tricky sometimes to kind of navigate this area. So these are examples. And once again, these are not my examples. These are the examples that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, who's the federal regulatory agency out of all of these, this is what they have come up with. And they're working on updating this list because actually they don't have YouTube clips, because what they had done was 10 years ago. I have kind of updated a little bit of it to bring it a little bit more into current times. But the important thing is that it can happen here. It can happen at the bar after work if a bunch of coworkers get together. It can happen on social media. Clearly posted after work, not at work time. But if it relates to the workplace, if it's a coworker, it can all be brought back in. So you have to be a little careful about that. That's why, frankly, I tell people to be a little careful about who they friend, or have separate pages or something like that. You know, particularly if you're afraid that you might cross the line sometimes. All right, if you could go next, to the next slide. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the handbook. No, we're not going to go through the whole handbook. I'll let Brendan do that. But we are going to go through the harassment policy because there are parts of it that are really important that you guys understand. And judges want to make sure that employers have taken the time to go through these important parts so that there's no question about what harassment is, what you should do if you feel like you're being harassed or you see somebody else being harassed, and then what's going to happen if you do report it. So this is verbatim out of the GPAC harassment policy. GPAC's committed to providing a work environment free of unlawful harassment based on, and then it's all those protected characteristics. So none of that should be surprising to you. Kind of already covered a little bit of that. So if we could go to the next one. So GPAC has committed that it's going to investigate any claim of harassment. And then it's going to take disciplinary action to make sure that it doesn't happen again. That if somebody's violated the policy, that they're going to take whatever action is necessary to make sure it doesn't happen again. If you could go on. So this is just a definition of what harassment is in your policy. And once again, this should be pretty familiar to you because these are the things that we've talked about already. That you believe that whatever the conduct is that it's so inherent to the job that you have to put up with it in order to keep the job, and that if you don't do that, that there's going to be some kind of adverse consequence. and that it's interfering with work, that it creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Okay? I think the camera just went out. So, oh, there we go. All right. So this is important. This is really important. If you forget anything else I say today, which you probably will, this is the one thing I really want you to remember, is that there is a policy for how you report it, and that you guys absolutely should report anytime you feel uncomfortable. And you don't, I mean, part of the current press, part of the thing about the current press that bothers me is that, you know, all you hear about is Matt Lauer somebody reported harassment and he lost his job the next day, or you know, all these different public figures, and you don't hear anything about the due process that happened, I hope, behind the doors. You don't hear that there was an investigation. But this is what's going to happen, is if somebody reports there's any kind of violation of this policy, any kind of harassment, then GPAC is going to investigate it. They're required to do that. And that investigation, they're going to not, you know, send it over the loudspeaker. They're not going to get the karaoke machine out and announce it to everyone. But they are going to investigate it. They're going to talk to people that might have witnessed it. They're going to talk to the person who was accused. And they're going to try to figure out what really happened. And at the end of that time, if they figure out that there was some violation of policy, they're going to take action. Now, does that mean that they're going to fire that person? I've investigated lots and lots of complaints of harassment in my career, and I bet there weren't 10 people that were terminated as a result of them. A lot of times, I just go in and talk to the person and that has been accused, and they are just, well, horrified or dumbfounded, had no idea that the person was offended by what they were saying or doing, and agreed not to do it again. You know, some people like to give hugs. Some people, you know, aren't cool with having people invade their personal space. All you have to do is say, hey, no more hugs of Sally or whoever, okay? That's the end of the day. So, all right, if you could go to the next one. So, as I said, we're going to go through this investigation. They can't guarantee confidentiality because they got to talk to people, but they're not going to broadcast it. And if you could go to the next slide, please. And then this is the other key thing that's really important. It's really important that you guys understand it, because if you don't understand it, you're not going to report it. And it's really important from a court standpoint. They think it's really important. And so there's no retaliation allowed. So you're protected from any bad thing happening to you. You should be protected from any bad thing happening to you because you reported harassment, because you participated in an investigation of harassment. And honestly, courts view this, they view retaliation as bad, as equally as bad as the initial harassment. And so it's a big deal. And you can be confident. I know Brendan, and he's not going to allow it. So you guys should be pretty confident that that's going to take place. I'm going to be really hungry by the time I leave this place. It's going to just keep coming in and out. Okay, and we already hit this, the discipline. The only discipline that's going to take place is discipline that's designed to stop the activity. It doesn't have to be, you know, every person just loses their job over it. This is how I used to kind of start my harassment policies. I used to just, you know, the golden rule, that you'll be just fine if you treat everybody the way you would like to be treated. Honestly, in a perfect world, that's not exactly true, because some people are more sensitive than other people, but it's pretty much mostly true. And so, you know, clearly a good policy for in the work environment to try to kind of just follow that policy. You know, there's a time and place for everything, and work is not the time and place for a lot of, you know, things that might be more appropriate with a group of friends at home. you know, or what, not even what's appropriate sometimes on late night TV, frankly, but that's just the reality of it. So, okay. And then the other thing that you really want to remember, you treat everybody like you'd want to be treated, but if somebody tells you that they're not cool with something that you're doing that you just think is funny and you're just joking around, then you really have to stop. You don't get to, you know, just think that they're just a big wet blanket. Well, I guess you could think that, but you have to just still stop doing it, because if you keep doing it, then you clearly have crossed the line, and there'll be consequences for that. So based on all this, you know, I told you there was going to be a quiz, and we're kind of moving into quiz territory. How much harassment do you think a reasonable person has to put up with?
0%.
0? Seems like a pretty popular answer. Anybody else have any other ideas? 2%? 2%. Actually, 2% is probably about right. You can go to the next slide. Very little. So you shouldn't have to put up with any, right? But you do get, you know, if somebody's crossing the line, you don't think it's funny, you don't think it bothers you, well, then you have to report it to somebody, and you have to give them an opportunity to know about it and stop. After that, if it keeps going beyond that, then that's more than you have to put up with. But sometimes you do have to put up with just a little bit so that there's an opportunity to communicate and get it back on the right path. All right, so here's my pop quiz. We're going to do just a couple of these, and then you guys get to go back and make millions of dollars on the phone. Okay, so all of my quiz questions are based on actual facts. I have changed the names to protect the not-so-innocent sometimes. But anyway, Tarzan gathers his direct reports and explains that he and Jane are breaking up. He then goes into detail about his recent sexual escapades with Jane down by the waterfall and how amazing the sex has been since they decided to split. So what do you think? Is that a violation of GPAC policy?
It's Tarzan and Jane, are they employees?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, of course.
One of them is an employee, Tarzan.
I would say it doesn't matter. I mean, no, it's not a violation.
It's not a violation?
That's my guess. Anyone else going to speak up here?
You made it like you shouldn't say it in French or French. So shocking as it might be, not all your coworkers want to hear about your sex life.
What, John?
I know, shocking. And in this particular situation, that was the case. The employee came in and complained about harassment because they didn't want to hear about great sex life. And so that's probably one of those conversations that's better left for another time, not necessarily in the workplace. Okay, so Jim Bob's the life of the lunchroom. He loves to tell crude jokes to his friends and coworkers. He does not intend to offend anyone by telling his jokes. Jim Bob's behavior is unprofessional, but no cause for concern. B should be encouraged since it builds morale, and no one has complained. Cannot be sexual harassment since he doesn't intend to offend anyone. Or D, could contribute to a hostile and offensive work environment. D. It is D. A lot of people, you know, and this is a case where I had to go talk to the guy because the owner of the business did not want to have to go talk to him, and I didn't want to have to go talk to him either. But super nice guy. I mean, really a nice guy. And he got his self-esteem from entertaining people. His jokes were funny. I mean, people laughed. But they crossed the line a lot. Not anything that you wouldn't see on Comedy Network or whatever that is, Comedy Central. But I had to go talk to him and say, hey, you're going to have to knock it off. So what I heard later is then he started telling only clean jokes. And they weren't funny. So anyway, I kind of ruined the place. But All right, so I'll move back, sorry. I'm bad. All right, so this is my most recent sexual harassment situation. Several sales employees, not to bash you sales folks, but you cause a lot of problems. A lot of the sexual harassment cases are based on salespeople. Several sales employees earned an incentive trip to an all-inclusive resort in St. John. I don't know if GPAC's doing that yet, but after a night of fun, several of the co-workers decided to go skinny dipping. Is that illegal harassment?
No, unless they say you gotta come with this group.
No. If they all agree to it.
Don't send these guys to St. John's, Brendan. So it's arguably not sexual harassment. You know, it's not a good idea to go skinny dipping with your coworkers. And that might be shocking to you. I don't actually have very many coworkers I'd want to go skinny dipping with, but you know, when you have a situation like this, people don't go skinny dipping generally with coworkers unless there's been a significant quantity of alcohol consumed, and that's a bad combination. So this company is being sued right now for sexual harassment. And you know, we have some defenses. Obviously, there was no gun to the head of the person who was voluntarily going, but she's saying that she felt like she had to, because otherwise she'd be the wet blanket of the group, and the boss wouldn't think she was fun, and you know, all of those kinds of things. So anyway, I think we need to wrap it up. I think there's another group coming, but you guys have been great. Thank you very much.